What inmates eat inside ADX Florence, America's most secure prison. There is a place in America where a man can go years without touching another human being. Where voices fade, routines harden, and time loses its meaning. Inside these walls, even food, the most basic human necessity, is stripped of comfort, stripped of choice, and reduced to a controlled ritual. But what does a man actually eat in a place designed to erase everything familiar? And more importantly, what does that kind of eating do to him over time? Because here, meals are not just about survival. They are part of the system. And what comes next reveals just how far that system goes. Before we step deeper inside, take a moment to subscribe and share where you're watching from. Because what happens here is rarely seen, and even less understood. This is not a story about food in the traditional sense. It is about control, isolation, and the subtle ways a system reshapes human behavior, one meal at a time. To understand what inmates eat inside ADX Florence, you first have to understand where they are. A prison designed to remove everything. ADX Florence is often described as the most secure prison in the United States. But security, here, is not just about walls and locks. It is about removing variables. Removing unpredictability. Removing human contact. Each inmate is placed inside a single cell, constructed from reinforced concrete. The furniture is not furniture in the traditional sense, it is part of the structure itself. A bed poured from concrete. A desk attached to the wall. A stool that cannot be moved. Even the window is angled in such a way that inmates cannot see the horizon. They cannot tell where they are within the facility. Orientation is deliberately erased. Inside this environment, every aspect of daily life is engineered. And that includes food. Because when you remove everything else, freedom, interaction, choice, what remains takes on a different kind of weight. A meal is no longer just a meal. It becomes one of the only predictable events in an otherwise controlled existence. And that predictability is not accidental. The journey of a meal. Long before a tray reaches a cell, it begins in a controlled, highly structured kitchen. The meals prepared at ADX Florence follow federal guidelines set by the Bureau of Prisons. Every calorie is calculated. Every portion measured. There is no room for improvisation. Large batches of food are prepared at once: beans, rice, processed meats, vegetables, pasta. Ingredients are chosen not for taste, but for durability, cost efficiency, and consistency. Consistency is critical. Because inconsistency introduces unpredictability. And unpredictability, in a place like this, is seen as risk. Trays are assembled in near silence. Workers move in patterns that are repeated every day. Scoop, portion, place. Scoop, portion, place. There is no artistry in the process. Only function. Once assembled, the trays are loaded onto carts, heavy, metal, designed for security. These carts are then moved through secured corridors, escorted, monitored, and delivered with precision. By the time a meal reaches an inmate, it has passed through multiple layers of control. And yet, what arrives at the cell is something far simpler. A tray. And a moment. What's actually on the tray? At first glance, the meals inside ADX Florence appear ordinary. Breakfast might include powdered eggs, reconstituted and cooked into a soft, uniform texture. A slice of toast, often dry. A small portion of fruit, sometimes canned. Lunch may bring beans, rice, or a processed meat product. Something designed to be filling, but not necessarily satisfying. Dinner rotates through simple dishes: pasta with sauce, a portion of chicken, or a stew. On paper, the meals meet nutritional standards. Calories are sufficient. Basic vitamins are accounted for. But nutrition does not equal experience. Because what is missing is variety, flavor, choice. Over time, the repetition becomes noticeable. Then overwhelming. Meals begin to blend together, not just within a day, but across weeks, months, years. And in a place where time already feels distorted, that repetition does something subtle. It flattens memory. You no longer remember what you ate yesterday. Because it feels like you've been eating the same thing forever. The moment of delivery. There is no announcement when food arrives. No voices calling out. No interaction. The tray appears through a narrow slot in the door, sometimes called a chuck hole. It opens briefly. Just long enough to slide the tray inside. Then it closes. The entire exchange lasts seconds. For the officer, it is routine. For the inmate, it is one of the few interruptions in an otherwise silent day. But even this moment is tightly controlled. Inmates are required to step back from the door before the slot opens. Hands must be visible. Movements must be predictable. Because even something as simple as delivering food carries risk in an environment where every interaction is calculated. Once the tray is inside, the silence returns. And the inmate is alone again. With his meal. Eating in isolation. There are no dining halls in ADX Florence. No shared tables. No conversations over meals. An inmate eats alone. Every time. The cell becomes everything: bedroom, bathroom, and dining space combined. The tray is placed on a small concrete surface. There are no utensils in the traditional sense, often a simple plastic spoon. The environment does not change. The lighting remains the same. The silence remains constant. And over time, eating itself begins to change. Some inmates eat quickly, finishing in minutes. Others stretch the process, slowing it down, turning it into an activity rather than a necessity. Because when there is nothing else to break the day, even a meal becomes something to hold on to. Something to extend. Something to control. But not everyone approaches it the same way. Some refuse to eat at all. And what happens when they do, is something the system is prepared for. When food becomes power. Refusing food is one of the few ways an inmate can assert control. A hunger strike is not just about protest. It is about reclaiming agency in an environment designed to remove it. At ADX Florence, hunger strikes are monitored closely. Medical staff track weight, hydration, vital signs. There are protocols for when intervention begins. And those protocols are not negotiable. Because while an inmate may choose not to eat, the system does not allow that choice to continue indefinitely. At a certain point, control shifts back. And the methods used to enforce that control are clinical, precise, and often controversial. But the deeper question remains. Why would someone refuse the only consistent part of their day? The answer lies not in the food itself, but in what the food represents. The loaf, food as discipline. There is a meal that exists outside the standard rotation. It is not designed for taste. It is not designed for variety. It is designed for compliance. Informally known as the loaf, this meal is used as a disciplinary measure. It is created by blending multiple food components, vegetables, grains, proteins, into a single mixture, then baking it into a solid block. Nutritionally, it meets requirements. But psychologically, it removes the experience of eating. There are no separate textures. No distinct flavors. Just a uniform mass. Inmates placed on this diet may receive it for days at a time. It is not starvation. But it is not normal eating either. It is a reminder that even something as basic as food can be altered, reduced, controlled further. And for those who experience it, the message is clear. There are levels to deprivation. And what comes next can go even deeper. The mind under routine. Over time, routine begins to shape the mind. Meals arrive at fixed intervals. Morning, midday, evening. No variation. At first, this predictability may feel stabilizing. But as days turn into months, and months into years, it begins to have a different effect. Life becomes segmented. Not by events, but by meals. Breakfast marks the beginning. Lunch marks the middle. Dinner marks the end. And then the cycle repeats. In this environment, food becomes more than sustenance. It becomes a clock. A way to measure time in a place where time itself feels distorted. But what happens when even that sense of time begins to fade? That is where the psychological impact deepens. And it does not affect everyone the same way. Adaptation and survival. Some inmates adapt. They create routines within the routine. Eating slowly. Saving portions. Mixing items together to create something different. These small acts may seem insignificant. But in an environment with almost no control, they matter. They are decisions. And decisions, however small, help preserve a sense of identity. Others struggle. Appetite fades. Interest disappears. Food becomes mechanical. Something done out of necessity, not desire. Because when isolation reaches a certain depth, even basic human instincts begin to shift. And that shift is not always visible. But it is always there. The long-term effect. Years inside ADX Florence leave a mark. Physically, mentally, emotionally. Diet plays a role in that transformation. Not just what is eaten, but how it is eaten. Alone. Repeatedly. Without variation. Without connection. Over time, the act of eating becomes detached from everything it once was. No longer social. No longer enjoyable. Just necessary. And in that necessity, something human is gradually reduced. Inside ADX Florence, food is not about choice. It is not about comfort. It is about control. 3 meals a day. Delivered without words. Consumed in silence. And repeated, again and again. For some, it becomes routine. For others, it becomes something else entirely. Because in a place designed to isolate, even the simplest act reveals something deeper. Not just about the system, but about what remains when everything else is taken away. When taste disappears. In the outside world, taste is tied to memory. A meal can remind someone of home, of family, of a specific moment in time. Inside ADX Florence, that connection begins to fade. The food is not designed to create memories. It is designed to avoid them. Seasoning is minimal. Salt is controlled. Sugar is limited. Not just for health reasons, but for consistency. Strong flavors can become a form of stimulation, and stimulation is something this environment is built to reduce. Over time, inmates begin to notice something subtle. Taste becomes less important. Meals are no longer anticipated. They are expected. The difference is small at first, almost unnoticeable. But as weeks turn into months, and months into years, the change deepens. Some inmates report that they stop thinking about what they are eating altogether. They chew. They swallow. They finish. Not because they want to, but because it is time. And when eating loses its emotional connection, it becomes something else entirely. A task. And tasks, inside this system, are never just tasks. They are part of a larger structure. And that structure has consequences. Food and discipline, the unwritten rules. In ADX Florence, rules are everywhere. Some are written. Others are understood. Food sits at the intersection of both. An inmate is expected to accept meals in a specific way. Step back from the door. Wait for the tray. Do not interfere with the slot. Return the tray when instructed. These actions may seem routine, but they are monitored closely. Because small deviations can signal larger problems. A delay. A refusal. A sudden change in behavior. Each one is noted. Each one is recorded. And over time, patterns emerge. Food becomes a way to measure compliance. Not just whether an inmate eats, but how they respond to the process. Do they follow instructions? Do they resist? Do they attempt to manipulate the system? These observations feed into something larger. A constant evaluation of behavior. Because inside this facility, behavior determines everything. And even something as simple as a meal can shift how an inmate is perceived. The silence between meals. Between meals, there is nothing. No conversation drifting from nearby cells. No distant noise of activity. Just silence. This is where the psychological weight of food becomes clearer. Because meals do not just provide sustenance. They break the silence. Briefly. When the cart approaches, there is a sound. Wheels against concrete. A faint metallic rattle. For a moment, something is happening. And then it's gone. The silence returns, heavier than before. Some inmates begin to listen for these sounds long before the cart arrives. They anticipate it. Not because of hunger. But because it means something is about to change, even if only for a few seconds. And when your entire day is defined by moments that brief, you begin to understand how powerful they can become. Reality versus expectation. Before arriving at ADX Florence, many inmates have experienced other prisons. Facilities where meals are served in groups. Where there is at least some level of interaction. Where food, while still institutional, carries a different meaning. ADX is different. Here, expectations are stripped away quickly. There is no cafeteria. No line. No choice between options. The first few meals can feel disorienting. The silence. The isolation. The absence of any shared experience. It becomes clear, almost immediately, that this is not just a higher level of security. It is a different kind of environment altogether. And food reflects that difference. It is not just simpler. It is more controlled. More predictable. More detached. And for many inmates, that realization marks the beginning of a deeper adjustment. One that goes far beyond diet. Religious and medical accommodations. Even within strict control, certain allowances exist. Religious diets are provided where required. Kosher meals. Halal meals. Special accommodations based on documented belief systems. Medical needs are also considered. Diabetic diets. Low sodium requirements. Caloric adjustments. But even these accommodations follow strict guidelines. They are not flexible. They are not personalized beyond necessity. Each tray is labeled. Each delivery is documented. Because any variation, no matter how justified, must still fit within the larger system of control. There is no room for interpretation. Only procedure. And in a place like ADX Florence, procedure is everything. Food as a marker of time. In isolation, time behaves differently. Days stretch. Weeks blur. Months lose definition. Without external reference points, the mind begins to search for structure. Meals provide that structure. 3 points in the day that remain constant. Breakfast. Lunch. Dinner. Some inmates begin to track time based on these intervals. Not by dates. But by meals. How many breakfasts have passed? How many dinners until the end of the week? It may sound abstract. But in an environment where nothing changes, even small consistencies become anchors. And when those anchors are tied to something as basic as food, it changes how that food is perceived. It is no longer just something you eat. It is something you measure your life by. The rare moments of variation. There are rare moments when the routine shifts. Holidays. Special occasions. On these days, the menu may change slightly. A different dessert. A more substantial portion. Something outside the usual rotation. The change is small. But inside ADX Florence, small changes carry weight. They stand out. They are remembered. For some inmates, these meals become markers. A way to distinguish one part of the year from another. A reminder that time is still moving forward, even when everything else feels static. But these moments are brief. And once they pass, the routine returns. Unchanged. Uninterrupted. Control from both sides. Control inside ADX Florence operates on multiple levels. From the outside, the system controls what is served, when it is served, and how it is delivered. From the inside, inmates seek control in smaller ways. How fast they eat. Whether they eat at all. How they arrange their food. These actions may seem minor. But in an environment where autonomy is almost non-existent, they matter. They are choices. And choices, even limited ones, help maintain a sense of self. But the balance is fragile. Because the system always holds more control. And any attempt to push beyond those limits is quickly corrected. When food stops mattering. For some inmates, there comes a point where food loses its significance entirely. Appetite declines. Interest fades. Meals arrive, but they no longer hold attention. This is not always a conscious decision. It can be gradual. A slow detachment from something that once felt essential. Because in prolonged isolation, the mind begins to shift priorities. Survival becomes less about physical needs, and more about mental endurance. And when that shift happens, even something as fundamental as eating can become secondary. Final descent into routine. Day after day, the process continues. The same meals. The same delivery. The same silence. There is no variation in the structure. Only in how it is experienced. Some adapt. Some resist. Some withdraw. But the system remains constant. Unchanging. Precise. And within that precision, food becomes more than sustenance. It becomes part of the architecture itself. A tool. A signal. A routine that defines life inside these walls. Inside ADX Florence, meals are not shared. They are not chosen. They are not remembered in the way most people remember food. They are delivered. Consumed. And repeated. 3 times a day. Every day. Until the days themselves begin to blur. And somewhere, behind a reinforced door, a man sits with a tray in front of him. Not thinking about taste. Not thinking about choice. Just following a routine that never changes. Because in a place built to control everything, even the act of eating becomes part of the sentence. Inside places like ADX Florence, even the smallest details carry weight. A meal is no longer just food, it becomes routine, control, and, for some, the last remaining structure in a life stripped down to its barest form. If this story stayed with you, there's more to uncover, because what happens inside these walls goes far beyond what we see on the surface. Until next time, stay aware, and look deeper.